¿Comieron bien? ¿Tomaron café? ¿Jugo? Bueno, muy bien, eso es
Very
importante
important.
para poder
In order to
continuar.
have enough energy to keep on.
Bueno, queremos invitarlos
Okay, so we would like to invite you now
a esta
to
nueva
join us
sesión
for this new
que
plenary
tiene
session.
como título
The title is Reflections on Service Learning as an Educational and Social Innovation. Service learning is a pedagogical proposal that is innovative. It contributes to the improvement of quality of life of many communities and improves the formal and non-formal educational offering. Students of all ages through service learning can apply the knowledge they learn in the classroom to the service of their communities. The actions they carry out in real context enables them to acquire new knowledge and develop skills for life, work, and citizenship engagement. We would like to thank the speakers Daniela Gargantine from CONICET Argentina, Bojana Colom from the University of Rijeka in Croatia, Leticia Lopez from UDEM Mexico, Alejandro Gimelli from CLAYSS Argentina, and the moderator Sebastián Puglisi, Secretary of Education in General Pueyrredón in Argentina. So Sebastián, I give you the floor and enjoy this session.
Bueno, muchas gracias. Buenos días a todos.
Thank you.
A todas. Como bien decían,
Good morning to you all. This is a plenary session on reflections on service learning as an educational and social innovation. We have four experts here. We will start with Daniela Gargantini, but we will have Bojana Chulum Ilich, Leticia Ivonne Lopez Villarreal, and Alejandro Gimelli. And we are going to introduce each of them as they are given the floor. Let me tell you a little bit about the behind the scene. I have three signs. One says 3 minutes, the other one says 1 minute, and the other one means that we are going to cut off the mic if they are not obedient. You have been allotted 15 minutes each. In the case of Bojana, she will have twice as much time because we will have consecutive interpretation, so we will try to finish this panel at 1. Let me introduce Daniela Gargantini, who is a researcher at CONICET. She's a teacher and researcher at the Catholic University in Córdoba and a regional coordinator of the university's social responsibility network of the Jesuit universities in Argentina. She was technical secretariat vice rector and academic vice rector of the Catholic University of Córdoba. Since 2004, she's in charge of the social and housing division in the School of Architecture of the university. She is also part of the board of Universitate and the team on spirituality and research. Daniela, you have 15 minutes. Hello. Good morning to you all. It is such a pleasure for me to be here with you. When Nieves was making her presentation today, she brought to my memory a lot of recollections. I remember that I came to the conference with one of my teachers, the architect Daniel de la Torre. We had been given the presidential award, and CLAYSS helped us put a name to what we were doing. We didn't know at that time that we were doing service learning in our university, and that had a lot of consequences because we became more visible. I worked also at a larger level in the university and also with the Association of Jesuit Universities. So I'm very pleased to be able to speak to you today. Here we are going to talk about the commitment to reality as a source of innovation. I'm going to refer to the path that we have followed. I thought it was interesting to start my presentation with these two questions. Why should we choose service learning as a methodology, and why we should use it as a source of educational and social innovation? So perhaps If we look at our history, we can focus on three dimensions. What happens at the personal level, I think it is important to understand why, as a teacher, as a lecturer, you choose this methodology. Then the institutional dimension, why we make the choice as a university to follow this pedagogy. Why in the network of Jesuit universities in Latin America choose service learning. And then the global dimension. Why we choose service learning as an educational model for the new world that we are trying to build. If you allow me, I will try to share a few thoughts on all these aspects in these 15 minutes that I have been allotted. If I don't have time enough, then I can share some more with you during the break. At a personal level, let me also make reference to my own path. In my case, I'm an architect. I'm part of CONICET. I'm a researcher at CONICET. I'm a teacher at the School of Architecture. And when I have to give an answer why I choose to work in service learning, why I use this methodology, I tend to use these pictures as a reference. Housing problems do not only require the discipline as architecture to get involved, but also it has to do with a lot of social and economic factors. We see poverty and also a reproduction of poverty conditions. The pandemic has exacerbated this, and we see people who don't have a decent place to live, so they can't study, they cannot work, they see their rights to health and safety made vulnerable. In urban settings, we live in fully fragmented communities, societies that are exclusive, where some have privileges to access certain rights, but in most of the households in Argentina, 30% of the Argentine households have no access to those rights. So this kind of cities, this kind of situations prevent the exercise of rights and also introduce different forms of violence. So that is how I decided to use service learning as a methodology to address all these topics, all these problems. At the same time, at a personal and at an institutional level, there is an ethical factor here. You cannot transform a reality that is not known. If you don't know the reality, probably I won't be able to think about any solutions to address those problems. So every time that I make that reality invisible, I'm preventing those transformation opportunities. And if I make others invisible, then I cannot do anything about them. So in Cordoba, we have more than 130 settlements that are not recognized. They are not even geo-referenced. We have more than 1,700 poor neighborhoods in Argentina, and only in 2018 they were identified at the territorial level. Until that day, we didn't know about those households that had been there for decades. They had not even been mapped. And in most of the schools of architecture in the universities in the country, subjects like ours, like problems related to housing, are optional. So as architects or students of architecture, you may choose to learn about this reality, the problems with housing, or you can just study interior design and you remain ignorant of what is happening. Some years ago, we wrote a paper with other colleagues saying reality is not elective, because in themselves these contents cannot be elective. They have to be a structural part of our curriculum. When Nieves was asked today about service learning, generating some curriculum reforms. I don't think that we need reforms to the curriculum to do service learning, but when you look at the service learning pedagogy, necessarily you have to effect some changes to the curriculum. There are topics that are introduced that perhaps had never been thought of as part of those subjects, and that come to the fore as part of the education process, not only for undergraduate students, but also for postgraduate students, for those studying a specialization, because we need to focus on those realities. So, in areas such as the experimental center of affordable houses, because most of my work is done there in that center. It's a center that exists for more than 60 years, and it develops technologies for poor sectors with high academic standards, together with CONICET and together with the department dealing with housing issues, and also in collaboration with some other initiatives of the network of university social responsibility of the Association of Jesuit Universities in Argentina. Part of the answer to the question why we chose this methodology has to do with that, the possibility of coordinating or relating high quality education, the exercise of your profession oriented to service for those of us who have faith, also to be able to put our faith into practice, and also to see equity and justice as means to change the reality at the social level. I don't know what happens in other schools, but I would say that in most schools of architecture in Latin America and all over the world, the city that is usually thought of looks more like the scale model that you see here. Very neat, tidy city in white, where everything is thought of, where everything is planned, where we can decide how people are going to live, when actually in real life, the city is completely different. It is affected by multiple conflicts, multiple tensions, multiple variables. And they are not reflected in our curricula and in the way that we exercise our profession. As Joan McDonald says, she is one of the leaders in affordable housing in the world. She is from Chile. She was the director of the Asian and African housing division. She said, well, architects need to come out of our crystal tower because we need to get from people to projects and not the other way around. So she's quite provocative, but also Father Ugalde from the Andrés Bello University and the rector of the Catholic University Managua also said it doesn't make any sense to continue educating successful professionals in failed societies. Professional success has to go hand in hand with the success of societies, the societies we live in. At the Catholic University, the rectors reminded us that we shouldn't be educating the exploiters of tomorrow, those that would replicate this inequality of rights for people. So working like this, working on the relationship between the profession and the promotion of justice in the field of social habitat enabled us to find a new way of educating, a new way of putting knowledge at the center with methodologies that are not usually used in schools of architecture. It also allowed us to educate different types of professionals with other competencies, with other skills, capable of having an impact and advocating for public policy. I was listening to Nieves, and in 2004, when we were invited to participate in the presidential awards, we were asked to bring with us two students, and we brought Celeste and Ludmila. They were 18 at that time. Ludmila today is my assistant in my chair, and she's also the director for Habitat of the city government of Córdoba, the second largest city in the country. So when we talk about advocating public policy, we refer to this, students sometimes are in the classrooms and they don't know why they are learning certain content, but they have that ability to have an impact. I still remember that she was so scared when she received a call from the mayor and she had to take over all the housing public policies for the city. So when we think about impact, these are privileges that sometimes teachers don't have, but it is a pleasure for us to see that that happens to our students. This methodology has enabled us to move from an education system based on formality, product, the city, the building project, some construction modalities, the private use, certain turnkey housing models to a different model that is closer to our reality, where we see a lot of informality, where what matters is the process more than the product, where the budgets are limited, where it doesn't matter if you are doing for, but you have to do with, and that requires a different professional profile. We need basic habitability rather than just houses, where we need to support community processes and not just construction processes. Basically, it means moving from this kind of model of university to these are the processes that you see here in these pictures, because this is the nature in our classroom lessons. The classroom is shifted, and we have some other partners that also help us in the learning process. In our experience, we were not happy with just providing technical support. We realized that although the poor communities were receiving technical support, they also had problems to access construction materials. They were very expensive. So together with the School of Economics, the School of Engineering, and the School of Marketing, we set up the materials bank. Just like the food bank, it receives donations from individuals and companies and can provide access to these vulnerable communities to construction materials. So we put our knowledge to the service of these communities. And of course, there need to be some institutional reforms in the universities in order to accommodate this kind of project. The rector may look at you with a strange face. Perhaps he won't understand what you are planning to do, but the rector ends up accepting and leaping forward. This is a project in Córdoba. When the schools were closed down, the food program for the students was also suspended. So a lot of soup kitchens were set up in the houses of these poor neighborhoods. So we realized that we had to rethink how we would modify the physical structure of those houses so that they could also accommodate the soup kitchen, because they were houses that housed 2 or 3 people, and now perhaps they are feeding 200 children or elderly people. This is a picture that shows the conditions of those soup kitchens. You see a deficit in all cases, in case of infrastructure, health conditions, and with technology of food and with the bromatology subjects, we went there to learn about the conditions, the safety conditions that should exist in these soup kitchens. So we had to study about technologies based on solar stoves or other type of furnaces that perhaps we would have never learnt about in our program in architecture. So perhaps in closing, I can share with you this experience, and that is that in all education levels, especially at the university, we need to go back to that role of making the necessary questions, the accurate questions. we
¿no? Para
are
que sumamos la
the
realidad
right space to ask
literal.
those
Y que la
questions.
pregunta tiene que ver
And the
con qué tipo de
questions have to do
educación, qué
with
tipo
what
de
kind of
universidad, qué tipo
education,
de
what kind of
profesionales
university,
necesitamos,
what
pero
kind of
también para qué tipo
professionals
de
we need,
desarrollo.
and
En
what
este
kind of
caso, para qué
development
tipo de
we
ciudad.
want to achieve, and what kind of city
Como
we
decía
want to build.
Boaventura de Sousa Santos,
As
necesitamos
Boaventura de
un
Sousa Santos
pensamiento
said, we
alternativo de
need an
alternativas, ¿no?
alternative
Y para
thinking
eso
about
no solo tenemos
alternatives.
que
And to do
salir,
that, we should
¿no?
not
Como fue en su
only
momento de parte de
go
su
out and
discurso
go
ante
forth
los 100 años de la reforma
as
universitaria, que yo reivindico es un
he
placer,
said in the
sino
speech
solo hay que
in the
salir como fue en
100th
el 18, hay que
anniversary
dejar entrar a la
of
universidad y a los ámbitos
um,
educativos otros
this
saberes, otras voces,
in this
esos
event
saberes,
where
esas
we see the
maneras
photograph.
de ser.
He said that we need to go out
Particularmente
and
para nosotros en esta búsqueda de
look for alternatives.
un pensamiento
So, in the
alternativo de
search
alternativas,
for
lo que nosotros
alternative
siempre nos ha
thinking about
permitido
alternatives, service learning has
consolidar la
enabled us
experiencia de
to
lo
give
real,
priority to
un espacio de
experiences
realización no
based
solamente
on reality,
profesional y personal,
as a
del
space
cómodo,
for
también con
professional and
trascendencia,
personal
nos ha permitido recuperar la
development,
centralidad de los más
to
vulnerables, poner en el
transcend.
centro de la agenda
Service
esas
learning has
necesidades
also
que
enabled
padecen
us to recover the
las
central
mayorías,
role of the
nos ha permitido
most
también favorecer
vulnerable
perspectivas
communities.
críticas e
It has
innovadoras,
also enabled
esto
us to
de ser
favor
agudos
critical and
en la
innovative
mirada y
perspectives, that
también
is,
en
to
las
have a
soluciones,
sharp look, but
también
also
nos ha
focus on
permitido
solutions.
favorecer
It has
un
also enabled
conocimiento
us to
interior e
favor some
integrado de un conocimiento
internal
no
and
más ético, no más racional, sino que es
integrating
afectivo,
knowledge
porque me involucro
and
con otros,
affection,
que busca
aff-
ayudar a la sociedad y a las personas,
and type of
¿no?
knowledge that is
Porque
related to
en sí me
affection,
invita a
to
incidir
that it
y
mobilizes
genera
you, that
competencias para
aspires to
enfrentar muchas
wisdom.
veces las tensiones de la vida
Also looking
sin caer en
for
extremismos
support in the
nuestros como
society and
sociedad, porque también
individuals,
hay veces
because you sometimes you
bueno,
have
no todo es
to
blanco y
walk the
negro, tengo que
path,
saber
and not everything is
administrar los
black and
grises,
white. You need
¿no?
how
Y
to
como
deal with the
profesional
grays
tratar de
in
unificar
between. As a professional, you
esos
need
caminos
to bring
y nos
together
ha permitido
those
de alguna manera construir
dichotomies.
una formación
And this has
transformadora,
enabled
¿no?
us
Tanto
also
no
to
solamente en
have
términos
a
académicos,
transformative
sociales, sino también
education
institucionales.
in academic terms, but
Para
also in
nuestra facultad, para
institutional
nuestra
terms.
universidad,
For
para las
our
universidades
school, for our
locales, esto
university, for
sigue
all the
siendo un
Jesuit
desafío.
universities, this
Cómo
is
este
still a
tipo de
challenge.
pedagogías
How this kind of
tensionan también nuestras
methodology
instituciones, generan nuevas
create
estructuras
tensions in our
organizativas, nuevos procesos de
institutions,
evaluación,
give way to
nuevos
new
marcos de seguimiento docente,
structures, give
restricciones
way
horarios,
to
¿no?
new
Que hacen a otro
training of
tipo
teachers,
de
to
ámbito
new
educativo, ¿no? Y por
assessment
consecuencia
models.
creemos que
And we
cuando esta
believe that service
definición genuina
learning
del ámbito
allows us
educativo,
to recover
¿no?
the
Es
genuine mission
provocar
of
transformaciones en nuestra
educational
sociedad,
institutions,
¿no?
that
Que
is
ese ámbito
to
de preguntas y de
generate
respuestas. Y
transformation
por
in
ese
our
sentido,
society, to
creo
be
que
a
también
space for
nos
questions and
merecemos
answers.
todo otro
And
mundo,
ultimately, I believe that
todos
all
en
of us
esta sala
deserve a different
nos
world,
demuestra que somos
and
muchos
all of
los
us
que estamos
here
comprometidos con
demonstrates
este
that there
tipo
are a lot of
de
people
aporte. Así que
committed to this
muchísimas
kind
gracias
of idea. So thank you so much
y
for
me
listening
importa
to
para
me,
seguir
and I'm
compartiendo.
glad to share with you more information. Thank you, Daniela. I'm going to introduce, while you take your seat, Boyana Julum Unic, who works as an associate professor at the University of Rijeka in Croatia, in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences in the Department of Education. Her research interests center on the intersection of engaged universities, the pedagogy of teaching and engaged learning, and youth and civic education. She is the director of the Foundation of the University of Rijeka for the 2021-2025 period. She started in her university policies associated with service learning, and she participated in the creation of the university charter on the formal recognition of the competencies of students acquired through community engagement. She was a member of the National Volunteering Committee, and she is currently a member of the National Working Group dealing with youth. She is a member of the National Council for Youth Work. It is an advisory board, and she's a member of the European Academy of Service Learning on Higher Education in Central and Eastern Europe, and she has participated in several projects funded by the European Union. She is one of the experts that contributed to the development of the first and single European framework of self-reflection for community engagement in universities. She collaborates with local and other types of authorities in different projects. She has written books, chapters, and papers on her own and in collaboration with others on topics related to university and its civic role. And it's also part of the TALUAR's network since 2008. Claudia is going to be in charge of the interpretation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hola a todos.
It's so strange. I know he was talking about me, but I haven't understood a
Qué
word.
raro, sé que estuvieron hablando sobre mí, pero la verdad que no entendí nada de lo que dijeron.
Can we? So let's dive in. I'd like to start this presentation with this John Dewey quote. I know Nieves already makes some reference to the John Dewey as well, but obviously it's inevitable. But I really like this quote when I'm talking about service learning. And Dewey said that we do not learn from the experience itself, because, I mean, just admit to yourself, how many times have you made the same mistake in your life?
Bueno, quiero empezar con esta cita de John Dewey. Sé que Nieves ya hizo referencia a John Dewey, pero a mí me gusta especialmente esta cita que se refiere al aprendizaje-servicio, ¿no? Él dice, nosotros no aprendemos de la experiencia solamente en la vida, ¿no? ¿Quién no ha cometido errores en la vida?
What Dewey says is that we need to reflect upon our experience to actually learn something from it. And this is now the moment where I really want to extend my gratitude to CLAYSS, to organizers for inviting me in and for actually allowing me to reflect upon my own professional and personal relationship with service learning.
Lo que dijo Dewey, para completar esta cita, que nosotros aprendemos reflexionando sobre la experiencia. Así que quiero aprovechar este momento para agradecer muchísimo a CLAYSS por haberme invitado y por haberme permitido ahora reflexionar sobre mi propia experiencia con el aprendizaje-servicio.
So what I want to do now is actually invite you to kind of a time travel, and it's going to be quite fast because we have like 10-ish minutes to go over 20 years. So please just jump in a time traveling machine with me.
Así que ahora quiero invitarlos a hacer un viaje en el tiempo, que va a ser un tiempo muy rápido, porque en unos 10 minutos tenemos que cubrir 20 años de experiencia, así que súmense a este viaje muy rápido.
So this is going to be a short journey of kind of a self-ethnography on my own personal and professional journey related with service learning.
Así que este va a ser un viaje muy corto, muy rápido, una especie de autoetnografía de mi trayectoria, tanto personal como profesional, relacionada con el aprendizaje-servicio.
So it started 20 years ago when I was a student. I was given an opportunity to go to West Virginia University in the United States, where I did research for my bachelor thesis, and where I was signed to a course that was a service learning course. The rest is history.
Bueno, esto empezó hace 20 años, cuando yo era estudiante, tuve la oportunidad de ir a estudiar a Estados Unidos, a la Universidad de Virginia Occidental. Allí preparé mi tesis para mi licenciatura y participé en un curso de aprendizaje-servicio.
So you can imagine a student. I was at the end of my higher education studies and then discovering this amazing pedagogy that significantly contributed and actually shaped the way I thought about education ever since, right after that particular experience.
Así que imagínense, yo era una estudiante, estaba terminando mis estudios universitarios y descubrí esta nueva pedagogía que realmente dio forma a cómo yo experimenté la educación de ahí en adelante, a partir de esta experiencia con el aprendizaje-servicio.
So for me, discovering service learning was literally discovering, a pearl of education. It was really something that completely transformed my way of teaching and learning and researching, and everything that I was doing after that was in a way related with service learning and this immense feeling and energy and inspiration that has engraved within me.
Entonces, de hecho, ese momento en el que descubrí el aprendizaje-servicio transformó totalmente mi acercamiento a la educación, la forma en la que enseñaba, la forma en la que aprendía, la forma en la que investigaba, todo lo que hice a partir de entonces relacionado con el aprendizaje-servicio, ¿no? Y toda la inspiración, toda la energía que me transmitió esa experiencia.
Several years later, when I got back from the United States, I got employed at a university. And ever since, this yellow little plane was me. So kind of deviating from still, but at the time in particular, very traditional higher education landscape.
Uh-huh. Entonces, bueno, unos años después ya regresé de los Estados Unidos, comencé a trabajar en una universidad y yo me veía a mí misma como ese avioncito de papel amarillo que pueden ver ahí, desviándose de la corriente, desviándose de esa educación superior que todavía era muy tradicional.
And I have been such an advocate of service learning that I have been trying to embed it in every single aspect of my academic life, in teaching, in research, in publishing, in developing different kind of collaborations with service learning, with civil society organizations, with local authorities, and particularly advocating institutional change on a national level, and later on throughout the years on the European level as well.
Uh-huh. Y bueno, desde entonces fui una fuerte defensora, hice mucho trabajo de incidencia por el aprendizaje-servicio en todos los aspectos de mi vida académica, al enseñar, al aprender, al trabajar con la sociedad civil, con las autoridades educativas. Hice mucho trabajo por este cambio institucional, primero a nivel nacional y después también a nivel de la Unión Europea.
And one of the things that I really wanted to do and that I was very passionate about is to contribute to my own university becoming an engaged university. And just to move forward really fast to 2022, the University of Rijeka was this year awarded a triple European award as a first runner-up and then as a People's Choice first place for the European Engaged University of the Year.
Bueno, desde entonces, fui muy apasionada por esto y quise aplicar esto en mi propia universidad, que mi universidad se convirtiera en una universidad realmente comprometida y solidaria. Y haciendo un avance rápido a 2022, quiero contarles que este año mi universidad resultó segunda en el triple premio europeo de aprendizaje y servicio solidario y fue la ganadora del voto popular como universidad comprometida socialmente.
Yes. It was a long journey, but it just proves that changes do happen.
Uh-huh. Fue un trayecto muy largo, pero demuestra que los cambios suceden finalmente.
But what I want to share now within the next two slides are just a glimpse of a research on service learning impact so that I can actually anchor my own personal passion in a scientific evidence.
Uh-huh. Y ahora en las próximas diapositivas quiero mostrarles el impacto que tuvo todo este trabajo en aprendizaje-servicio que me permitió como anclar toda esta pasión personal que yo tenía por este campo en una base científica.
I feel like another eye has grown. This is actually a quote from a research that I've just recently published and co-authored with a colleague of mine. And, I think that rarely something speaks so loud on the transformative potential of service learning like this quote does.
Y esta es una cita que incluimos en un trabajo de investigación que hice con colegas, que dice, siento como que creció otro yo. Y creo que nada puede representar tan claramente qué es lo que se siente al hacer este trabajo como esta cita que vemos aquí.
If we focus just, and these are just bits and bytes, there are like thousands and thousands of studies, but I kind of try to summarize some of the key traits.
Acá son algunas muestras nada más, porque de hecho hay miles de estudios, pero bueno, acá recogí algunos simplemente a modo de muestra para que vean algunos.
So if we focus now on this area of research studies focused on pro-social attitudes and behaviors of students, then you can see that there are studies proving that service learning contributes to students' level of acceptance of cultural
La
diversity.
investigación demuestra que el aprendizaje-servicio contribuye a una mayor responsabilidad social de los estudiantes y también a un mayor sentido de responsabilidad social.
Students are developing more caring relationships with others. Students are continuously being engaged as volunteers.
Los estudiantes desarrollan una relación más solidaria con los demás, van involucrándose más en trabajos de voluntariado.
And last but certainly not least, there are studies continuously proving the transformative potential of service learning and its contribution to students' radical habitus change. And this radical habitus concept talks about students being inclined to actually continue being actively engaged in their communities even after they close down their own service learning experience.
Y por último, pero no menos importante, los estudios demuestran que hay un gran potencial de transformación entre los estudiantes. Esto lleva a un cambio radical de hábitos. Hábitos entendido como que aún después de completar sus proyectos de aprendizaje-servicio, los estudiantes incorporan esta actitud y siguen participando en aprendizaje-servicio aún después de terminar sus estudios.
Now, another set of studies that I want to share with you are those that have been done with a long-term perspective, with what we would call like service learning alumni, so students who have had service learning experience in the past.
Y otro grupo de estudios que quería compartir con ustedes son estos de más largo plazo. Son estudios que se hacen con exalumnos, es decir, alumnos que estuvieron expuestos en el pasado a proyectos de aprendizaje-servicio.
So you can see also that students who have participated in service learning courses show clear intentions to become more, civically engaged in their communities by continuing being volunteers, and they're actually more likely to become volunteers up to 5 years after their graduation.
De hecho, podemos ver que su participación en el aprendizaje-servicio, en cursos de aprendizaje-servicio, hace que los estudiantes muestren intenciones claras de ser más activos desde el punto de vista cívico, participando en proyectos de voluntariado, y de hecho también que demuestran esta inclinación a participar en proyectos de aprendizaje-servicio hasta 5 años después de haber terminado los estudios.
You can see that students who participated in service learning courses develop positive attitudes toward their own personal and social responsibility. And what I think it's even more interesting and important for all of us to have in mind within this future and long-term perspectives is that students who have had service learning experience tend to design their own professional future with a service element in it. So they tend to seek and hold those kind of jobs that are service-related jobs.
Y otra cosa que vemos es que los alumnos que participaron en cursos de aprendizaje-servicio tienden a tener estas actitudes positivas hacia su propia responsabilidad personal y social. Y lo que es más importante, tienden a diseñar sus futuras carreras profesionales incorporando esta noción del aprendizaje-servicio. Es decir, tienden a tener puestos de trabajo con esta noción del aprendizaje-servicio en mente.
And the last part of this slide, studies show that students gain, greater gains in their own attitudes involving political and social justice awareness, their own personal civic action, and much higher personal political participation in the future.
Y por último, estos estudios muestran que estos estudiantes tienen una mayor actitud que tiene que ver con conciencia en cuanto a la justicia política y social y la acción cívica, y que también tienden a tener una participación política mucho más activa.
So, if I can wrap it up with these kind of studies, what they say is that if you engage children in elementary schools in service learning projects, they are more likely to be engaged when they transfer to secondary schools.
Entonces, para resumir lo que nos muestran estos estudios, podemos ver que si involucramos a los alumnos en proyectos de aprendizaje y servicio en la escuela primaria, es mucho más probable que lo sigan haciendo cuando pasen a la escuela secundaria.
And if you engage them in secondary schools in service learning projects, they are not only more likely to stay engaged at a university level, but they're even more likely to initiate different kind of community engagement and service learning activities.
Y, a su vez, si los mantenemos involucrados en la escuela secundaria, en este tipo de proyectos de aprendizaje-servicio, seguramente se van a mantener involucrados y van a participar en la universidad, y muy probablemente ya en su vida profesional van a iniciar estos proyectos de solidaridad.
And now we can see that there is also evidence that if you engage them at the university level, they're most likely to continue following their own professional identity through service-related jobs and working with disadvantaged groups.
Y hay mucha evidencia entonces de que si siguen participando en la universidad en este tipo de proyectos, bueno, la evidencia muestra que en su vida profesional, como dijimos antes, van a mantener esta identidad de involucrarse en acciones de aprendizaje y servicio con los grupos más vulnerables y en mayor desventaja.
And this is where this power of a domino kind of effect is embedded.
Y acá es donde vemos incorporado ese efecto poderoso del efecto dominó, ¿no?
Now, if you take all of these research studies results, all of those narratives of service learning being a powerful pedagogy, now play around with these numbers that you can see on the slide. So at this point, there are around 740 million pupils in elementary schools across the world.
Ok, bueno, entonces si tomamos todos estos resultados que vimos de los estudios que muestran que el aprendizaje-servicio es una pedagogía poderosa, vamos a jugar un poquito con todos esos números que vemos en la pantalla. Por ejemplo, sabemos que en todo el mundo hay 740 millones de alumnos en escuelas primarias.
There are 600 million of them in secondary schools.
Hay 600 millones en escuelas secundarias.
More than 100 million of university students across the world.
Hay más de 100 millones de estudiantes universitarios en todo el mundo.
Calculate all of that.
Bueno, sumen todo.
On the other side, there are 85 million teachers, academics, and researchers. And there are so many communities in different kind of pressing needs of our contemporary crazy times we're living in.
Y por otro lado tenemos unos 85 millones de docentes, académicos, investigadores en todo el mundo, y hay muchísimas comunidades atravesando necesidades en este mundo loco en el que estamos viviendo en este momento.
And what does service learning has the power to do? It has the power to just connect all the dots, right? To connect those pupils in elementary and secondary schools, and there are like 1.5 billion of them.
Ujú. Bueno, ¿y qué tiene el poder de hacer el aprendizaje-servicio? Justamente tiene el poder de ir conectando todos estos puntos, conectar los alumnos de escuelas primarias con los alumnos de escuelas secundarias, y fíjense que hay 1.500 millones en todo el mundo, contando todos primaria y secundaria.
If you think about these 100 million students across the globe, those are the people who are going to be our future leaders. They're going to be mayors, they're going to be directors of banks, they're going to be new school and university principals. They are going to lead the new world.
Y si piensan en esos 1.500 millones de jóvenes, ellos son los futuros líderes, los futuros intendentes, alcaldes, directores de bancos, líderes universitarios. Ellos son los que van a liderar el mundo.
And global citizens and new world leaders, they need to be educated as caring, empathetic, socially responsible, and engaged citizens and leaders. And service learning is a pedagogy that offers such education.
Y si pensamos entonces en estos ciudadanos globales, los líderes del futuro, bueno, ellos tienen que ser educados para ser ciudadanos solidarios, empáticos, con responsabilidad social, y justamente la pedagogía del aprendizaje-servicio es la que tiene el poder para lograr eso justamente.
So it's our job to build this socially responsible educational environment for all of our pupils and students together, so that we can actually enter them into the world of them being agents of social change.
Entonces, nuestra responsabilidad como educadores es formar a estos alumnos como ciudadanos socialmente responsables para que en el futuro sean los agentes de cambio del mundo.
And although I'm very passionate about service learning and a true believer, I think it's important to send out a message that service learning is not a magic wand, okay? And we educators are not wizards, okay?
Pero si bien soy muy apasionada con el tema del aprendizaje-servicio, creo que también tenemos que enviar ese mensaje de que el aprendizaje-servicio no es una varita mágica y que los docentes no somos magos.
Behind this magic, I mean this magic itself, it's kind of a nice euphemism for a very hard work.
Detrás de esta magia tenemos, es un eufemismo, ¿no? Pero tenemos esto que es un trabajo muy difícil. Bueno, es un juego de palabras con el hada madrina y algo muy difícil de traducir.
And I want to remind you all, again, Nieves and I, like-minded people, I always like to go back to Freire as well, and this quote, the educator has the duty of not being neutral.
Y me gusta citar también, como hizo Nieves, volver a citar a Paulo Freire cuando dijo que el educador, el docente, tiene la obligación de no ser neutral.
So embracing service learning as a critical, value-based, transformative, and empowering pedagogy is necessary.
Entonces, abrazar, adoptar el aprendizaje-servicio como una pedagogía crítica, empoderadora, eso es una necesidad.
But that magic lies within all of you educators. Thank you.
Y esa magia yace y está en todos ustedes, educadores. Gracias.
Muy bien. Muy bien. Bueno, volvemos. Ahí está. Muchas gracias, Boyana. Vamos ahora a presentar a nuestra amiga Leticia Ivón López Villarreal. Ella estudió una licenciatura en Mercadotecnia, maestría en Educación con especialidad en los procesos de enseñanza-aprendizaje y doctorado en Ciencias Sociales en el Tecnológico de Monterrey. Una maestría en Dirección de Servicios Culturales, Sociales y Escolares en la Universidad de Florencia, en Italia. Ha sido docente en secundaria, preparatoria y educación superior en diferentes instituciones educativas como el Instituto Mater, Universidad Tecmilenio, Tecnológico de Monterrey, Universidad de Monterrey, en temas de humanidades, espiritualidad, ciencias sociales, emprendimiento y responsabilidad social. Ha colaborado en el desarrollo y consolidación de diferentes proyectos e iniciativas sociales. Fundó la organización de Pequeños Gigantes Mexicanos, que protege los derechos de niñas, niños y adolescentes que habitan y egresan de casas hogar en Nuevo León. Actualmente forma parte del Consejo Académico de Universidad y es directora del Centro para la Solidaridad y Filantropía de la Universidad de Monterrey.
From the University of Monterrey. Leticia, you have 15 minutes. Good morning. Before starting, while I was preparing for this panel, Nieves told us that it was important to tell you how we first came in contact with service learning. So that will be the starting point. 16 years ago, I was teaching a class in the business unit in my alma mater, and I was told that the subject was going to shift to service learning and for that semester. So I said, well, this sounds very nice, but I have no idea what this is about. So I received some training, and I realized that all those social activities I was involved in could be taken to the classroom, and the students that were with me for one semester, I could see some significant changes even 5 months later with regard to the content taught in that class. It was a class on micro business planning and development, so the stalls that you see in the park, hair salon, etc. And years later, I joined the University of Monterrey and the department where I'm working today. I was gladly surprised to see that CLAYSS had provided training in 2012 to a group of teachers 1 year before I joined the university, and one of my duties was to continue promoting this at the university. So after 2013 until today, I focus on how we can educate agents of change. And let me tell you a little bit about them, the University of Monterrey, where I come from, the institution that I represent here. So what do we do? In our university, we have a requirement to do service learning activities. It is a requirement for graduation to carry out a service learning project in the last year of the bachelor's degree. And there are some other students that at a higher level have to spend 2 semesters working on service learning. So we try to go even further beyond trying to solve some social problems. But before focusing on the social innovation, I would like to say that this university was founded by 5 religious congregations: the Maris, the Lasallian, the Sisters of the Incarnated Word, the Daughters of Maria Inmaculada Guadalupe. And here you see the principles of our university. Human beings can only reach their full realization when doing service to others. The second principle is that every person is called upon being fully human. This is associated with humanism. And humanization is experienced when you open yourself to others and you transcend. So this speaks about openness. So service, humanism, and openness have enabled us to do something in the classrooms for the common good and social justice from the very beginning of the institution. So when I met CLAYSS, I saw that there was a harmonic relationship that we could establish, and that we could emphasize this notion of service learning with the teaching staff. Since then, we realized in different areas that it was important to come up with special programs and special contents with trying to address social problems. These programs that you see here on the screen are part of a selection program for students. We identify these students 2 years before they join the university. We identify those students that have inclination to service, and we choose them to join us in our transformation activities, and we give them a scholarship. For drivers of change, we look for these service-oriented students, and they pay for part of the program. And Linda Scholars is a scholarship, and students have to develop a social project throughout their career. Líderes Plus is a program focused on students in the last semesters. And there is a Yunus Innovation Pathway Center that provides support to students for developing social innovation projects at the university. These 5 programs relate to students that put in practice service learning in their activities in the academic institution. So in addition to the academic curriculum, they do additional activities focusing on subjects that have to do with the community, and we call them service learning. So these projects last for 4 years as a minimum in some cases, and in others 1 year. So, what is the curriculum plan that we had to develop? Every program has its own curriculum, but it is important to think about the contents in all the different levels. The contents need to be related to some problems in the community. So here we came up with an education plan, and in that plan we had curricular content, disciplinary content, but also content aimed at effecting a change in specific territories in the community. So this is a mandatory requirement that they have to complete in order to complete the program, but this gives them separate certificates. Here we focus on these subjects: social and cultural context, problem approach, social innovation tools, prototype and follow-up, implementation and evaluation. So these subjects are supported with ongoing reflection that students have to do in the communities and the territories that are part of the program. So I wanted to bring here an example to show you how, beyond the predefined subjects, we can have supplementary alternative programs to reinforce the processes and the experiences of service learning of our students. That is why we believe that in service learning we can produce change makers or agents of change. We are part of the campus for Ashoka. As you can see, we are a university considered as a change maker producing university, given the different activities that we carry out. And this project that integrates the curriculum and the problems in the community has enabled us to have a group of students like the ones that you see here in the picture, 777 to be more precise, out of the 15,000 students that we have in the university, that are special to us because they stand out from the rest of the students. Perhaps the other students, we are already planting the seed of service learning through the different subjects and experiences that we offer to them. But these 700 students already had that seed implanted in them, and we are helping them grow that and bloom in this field. So we came up with this vision with different departments in the university joining these programs. For you to better understand what I'm referring to, I'm going to share with you a video where you can see what they do and the results of this type of social innovation in service learning. Students with an inclination to service in order to foster their integral development and coming up with long-term plans. Our students are characterized by being change makers, engaged with social issues, aimed at achieving social justice. They participate for 1 year in social projects. The program gives students personal support in terms of human development and territorial development processes. At a social level, in education, at an economic level, environmentally, through a program based on 5 pillars. First, education, focus on human development. Second, national and international experiences to expand their perspective and understand other ways of addressing problems. 3, support in social processes, providing support to students so that their processes fulfill these requirements. A long-term vision, increasing the quality of life of people. 4, mentorship and follow-up, providing them with support at a personal and professional level. 5, consolidation of a social project, professionalization of social initiatives. When they get to the 7th semester, students reflect on which will be their legacy, and they will receive one of the 3 forms of accrediting their projects. First, the project professionalization. That means development a legal entity that ensures sustainability of the project. 2, developing a productive entity that can continue with the project without them being present. And 3, a well-intended closure, that is the impact on the community. The program aims at educating engaged students in long-term development processes in the public, private sector and in civil society with the following characteristics. They are transformative entrepreneurs that carry out long-term projects and focusing on specific issues with critical abilities for dealing with social realities. If you want to know more, visit this website. This is an example of one of the 5 programs that I shared with you before, where you have a plan, a complementary curriculum, and every subject is linked to the processes to provide a solution to a community problem. We have different assessors that supervise and monitor and oversee what we do at the university. And figures also show us that the service learning methodology is useful to us. We have the National Survey of Student Engagement as our assessor, and the figures show that 96% of students had a subject that they chose that was related to service learning. This has been applied in the university since 2013, and we have another study where we assess the leadership skills of our students. And once again, here the results show that it is worth pursuing service learning, that it can make a meaningful transformation while they are studying, not only before graduation, but also in every semester we can do an assessment that allows us to see the impact of this pedagogy. I think that whoever wants to live with dignity and to the fullest has no other way but to recognizing the others and looking for their own good. That is why we are here. Thank you. Thank you, Leticia. All right, now I'm going to introduce to you Alejandro Jimeli, who has a degree in work relationships. He is a professor of sociology. He's an expert on educational management. He has a diploma on education and new technologies. Since 2005, he has been participating in service learning activities. He was also the consultant of the National Service Learning Program of the Ministry of Education in Argentina. And since 2011, he has been part of the technical team in CLAYSS, and since 2014, he has been the coordinator of the school support program in CLAYSS. He is a teacher in secondary and university education, and he has worked in different schools. Thank you, Seba. Good morning to you all. Before starting with my presentation, I need to say the following. I was reminded a few minutes ago that today it is the birthday of the Republic of Uruguay. Our Uruguayan brothers and sisters are celebrating their independence today, so I had to make that comment before starting. So if you allow me, those of you here at the head table, in the audience, and those that may be watching us through YouTube, I would like to share briefly with you the reasons why I have chosen service learning. I have chosen it not just as a methodology, but also as a lens through which I can see reality, and a true cosmovision to understand the world from kindergarten all the way to university. Since my colleagues at the table have already told you so clearly about service learning, I will be more modest, and I will just tell you about two stories that are interrelated. One my call as a teacher, and the other one my participation in class. And I will try to be a good teacher and leave you with good questions that can accompany us for the rest of the day today and the following days. As Seba said, I am the principal of a secondary school with 900 students that are teenagers and a significant number of adults. So this reflection also relates to me. And since December 2004, I have been part of CLAYSS. I joined CLAYSS almost as a way to continue my first steps as a teacher in a secondary school in the formal education system. I thought that CLAYSS was a space that allowed me to understand education in such a way that I could align the objectives of offering the best possible education with the fact that that education should be the tool for each student to transform their context and therefore the reality. As it happened with most of us in service learning, I wanted to take this to my teaching activity. The first project that I carried out as a teacher was
el cual
called
jugaba con el hecho de que
Studying
estudiar
Gives You
implicaba
a
un esfuerzo
Job.
importante
This
para los y las
try
estudiantes
to show
y a la
that
vez
studying
ese
implies a
contenido adquirido
significant
podía ser
effort by
transmitido a una
students, but
persona sin
at the
empleo.
same time that content could
Yo
be
dictaba la
relayed
materia
on
Recursos
to
Humanos, donde le
a
enseñaba todos los
person that was
reactivos de mercado de
jobless.
trabajo,
I was
cómo
teaching
acceder a ellos en
human
entrevistas,
resources,
confección de currículums, etc.
and there
Las
I
personas
taught
sin empleo
about
podían acercarse
the
a la
labor
escuela
market, how
y en el
to prepare
contexto
a
de una entrevista con
resume.
los
So
estudiantes,
people that were
estos me
jobless could
confeccionaban el
come to the
currículum,
school
cargaban los datos
and
en un
they
portal
would
de
have an
búsqueda de
interview
empleo
with
que en
my
ese momento
students
habían
and they would
comenzado a
prepare their
proliferar,
resumes. They
y
would
entregaban un
enter the
documento
data in
que orientaba a la
job
persona en la
search
existencia de bolsas de
sites,
trabajo locales
and at that
o
time
sociales y nacionales.
they were
Y
put in
además daban
contact with
tips para entrevistas laborales.
um,
Esta primera
employers that were looking
aproximación,
for
que se llamó,
employees.
comprometió muchísimo
That
a
first
mis estudiantes,
approach was
era quienes habían definido a su vez
created a
cuál
lot of
sería la
interest
población
and
destinataria.
enthusiasm in my
Comenzó a darme
students.
pistas
And
de
from
cómo responder
there,
la
I got
pregunta
some
que
hints
seguía
as
mi
to
clase.
how I could answer a question
No
that
solo cuál es
was
el mejor modo de
beyond the
dictar una
topic of my
asignatura,
class.
sino cómo es una
Not
buena
just
escuela.
how to teach a subject,
Lección
but
que luego
also
habré querido
what a good
incorporar
school should be like.
a mi práctica ya como
This is
directivo.
something that later on I tried to
Y
incorporate
aquí
to
un
my
tiempo
own
después
practice as a
llegó a
principal.
CLAYSS y otro poquito
Later
después
on, I
al
joined
Programa Nacional de
CLAYSS
Educación
and then
Solidaria que
the
conducía Nieves en el
National
Ministerio de
Service
Educación
Learning
Argentina.
Program that was led by Nieves at the Ministry of
En el
Education in
programa es donde
Argentina.
después de
It
viajar
was
muchísimo por el
there in
país
the
y
program
conocer
after
todas
traveling
las
throughout the
escuelas,
country
empecé
and
de a
getting
poquito
to
a
know
responder
all
la pregunta
types of
del párrafo
schools
anterior
that I
sobre
started
cómo
to
sería una buena escuela.
find an answer to the previous
En
question
todas las escuelas que
about what
desarrollaban
a
proyectos de
good
aprendizaje
school
en
should look
servicio
like.
se
In all
destacaba
schools dealing
prácticamente
with
las
service
mismas
learning
características.
projects, I could see
Primero,
the same
son
characteristics.
escuelas
First,
que, como afirma Brunner,
as
ponen
Brunner
en
would say,
contacto
these
con
are
otros mundos
schools that
posibles al estudiante
put the
al
students in
situarlo
contact
en el
with other
aprendizaje en el
possible
territorio.
worlds by situating learning in the
Segundo,
territory.
generan
These are
otra
schools
relación con
that
el
also
conocimiento.
generate another type of
El
relationship
conocimiento
with
no es un
knowledge.
producto para llenar
Knowledge is
memorias
not a
o
product
bibliotecas
that
vacías,
just fills
sino para
memories
ser
or
apropiado,
empty libraries or
analizado,
bookshelves.
reflexionado,
It needs to
enriquecido y
be
finalmente
owned,
empleado en un sentido
analyzed,
transformador.
reflected on, enriched, and finally used with a
Son escuelas
transformative
donde,
purpose.
como dice Jan
These are
Machelin, no
schools,
solo se
as Jan
conocen las
Machelin
cosas,
said, that where things
sino que
are
se
not just
expone a los
known,
estudiantes a las
students
cosas.
are exposed to things.
Que los pone, y ahí vuelvo a Brunner,
And
en
going back to
relación
Brunner,
con otros mundos,
these are schools that
vinculándolos
put
con ellos,
students in
haciéndolos
connection with
sentir
other
identificados
worlds and
con esos mundos.
in a relationship with
Machelin dice
them
algo más.
so that they can
Sin
feel
esta doble
related to
vinculación
those
con
worlds.
los otros
And as
y con
Machelin
los saberes,
adds,
no
without
hay
this
aprendizaje.
dual relationship with others and with
Otro
knowledge, there
aspecto
can be no learning
que se
possible.
destacaba en estas escuelas
Another aspect that
es
stood
que
out
los
from these
estudiantes
schools is that students
comienzan a habitar
started to
la escuela,
inhabit the school,
cosa que es muy distinta
which
de
is quite
visitarla.
different from just
Son escuelas donde hay
passing
mucho
by.
ruido,
These are schools
pero
where
porque se
there is a
escuchan
lot of
muchas
noise,
voces.
but because many voices are heard.
Las escuelas transitadas, por el contrario, son
Schools
aquellas donde todos están mirando alrededor
that
todo el tiempo.
students just
Y
go
donde el
by
aprendizaje solo
or
puede
pass by
medirse
are
en cantidad de horas
schools where
de
students
clase
are all the
cursadas.
time paying attention to their watches
Las escuelas
and
solidarias,
where their
las
learning can
primeras
be
cosas
only
que
measured
cada
in
uno de
number of
ustedes
hours of
descubrirá cuando las
lessons.
conozcan
But
es
in
que los estudiantes no quieren
solidarity,
irse.
service-oriented schools,
¿Quién quiere
students
irse de un
don't
lugar
want to
donde es
leave.
escuchado,
Who would
donde
like
se
to
trabaja
leave
con
a place
amigos,
where they
donde
are
cualquiera
listened
sean
to,
mis
where they can
talentos,
work with
tengo un
friends,
lugar y
where
una tarea para
regardless
realizar?
of their talents and skills, they have a task to fulfill?
Con esos aprendizajes,
With that kind of
tiempo después
learning,
en CLAYSS
sometime
comenzó lo que
later
podemos
in
llamar
class, we
los
started
programas de
what we
apoyo,
call the support programs.
que comenzó con unas pocas
They started
escuelas
with
rurales
just a
para
few
cuyo
rural
apoyo
schools.
contábamos con la generosidad de
We
la
had support
Fundación Bember,
from the
para haber
Bember
alcanzado
Foundation for
hoy,
those schools.
27 de agosto,
And on
744
August the
instituciones
27th, we will
educativas.
have reached 744 educational institutions with
Son
that
muchísimas
program.
instituciones,
I think that we
son
need
jardines
to
de infantes,
give a show of
son
hands to
escuelas,
class because
son
these are
universidades.
schools, these are universities,
¿Qué
and
significaba
here we are
apoyar?
talking about students.
Y aquí
What do
comparto
we
el
mean
siguiente
by
hito de
support?
descubrimiento que
And
se
this is
como
the second
organización
milestone,
que hice involucrado
the second
personalmente.
discovery breakthrough that
Apoyar es
we
acompañar
made
al
as an
nivel real,
organization and myself as an
no delante
educator.
ni atrás,
Support
y
means
mucho menos
walking
encima,
by
como
your
hacen
side, not in front of you, not behind
Hay
you, as
testigos,
many
hay
experts
docentes,
do.
estudiantes,
That means walking
respetando
next
tiempos,
to
sugiriendo
principals,
caminos,
teachers, and students,
sistematizando aprendizajes,
giving them enough
celebrando
time,
logros.
suggesting paths,
Me
systematizing
animo a decir que
learnings, and
desarrollamos un
celebrating
modo
together
CLAYSS de
achievements.
acompañar.
I dare to
Una
say that we
marca de
developed the
fábrica
CLAYSS
que
mode
donde
of
sea que apoyemos
support,
una escuela o una
like a
universidad,
branded name
sea la más
that
solitaria escuela de montaña
means that
o la
now
más
we can
renombrada
support a
universidad,
school, a
lo haremos
university,
con todo el
regardless
expertise
of their
que
location or the
cualquiera de los
popularity,
equipos de
and we
CLAYSS
can
puede
do this
aportar,
with the
pero
expertise
siempre
that the
desde un
CLAYSS
mismo lugar y con la
extraordinary
misma
team has,
filosofía.
always from the same place and with the
Y
same
aquí voy llegando
philosophy.
al final de esta
And I'm
exposición,
getting to the
pero no al
end of
final de mi
my
compromiso
intervention,
del
but not the
aprendizaje
end of my
servicio.
commitment to service
Porque
learning.
habiendo elegido CLAYSS y habiendo elegido
I
el
have
aprendizaje
chosen service
servicio,
learning and I
como
have
decía al
chosen
principio,
CLASS, as
no
I
habré
said
elegido solo una opción
at the
metodológica,
beginning, not because I was
sino que
just
habré
choosing
elegido
a
una concepción de la
methodological
educación.
option, but a conception of
Algunos
education.
llaman a esta mirada
Some may call
optimismo
this
pedagógico,
kind of vision
que no es otra cosa que
pedagogic
creer en aquello que creían los
optimism.
grandes pedagogos de la
This
historia.
is what the greatest
Comenius,
pedagogues in
Sassi,
history
Dewey,
upheld.
Freire.
Comenius,
Y la
LaSalle,
educación
Don
puede
Bosco, Dewey,
provocar los
Freire,
cambios
and that is that
económicos,
education
sociales
can
y
make
políticos
the economic, social,
necesarios
and
para
political
vivir en
changes
una
that are
sociedad más justa.
needed to live in a fairer
Mientras me
society.
siguen corriendo el horizonte de la utopía, como
The
dice Galeano, y esta sociedad
utopian
llega,
horizon is still
sigo
moving
caminando con dos
away, as
patas,
Galeano would
una
say,
en la
but these
escuela y
societies,
otra en clase.
I'm still
Abrazo a todos y
walking
gracias.
with my two legs, one in the school and another one in class. Thanks to all of you. Thank you, Ale. Thank you so much. Okay, so we are finishing on time. We still have a few minutes left, so let me share with you some final thoughts by way of conclusion. Listening to you all has been extraordinary. You have made such strong statements, and I am filled with hope. Daniela from the School of Architecture has helped us reflect on those sharp questions. These questions allow us to think what our place should be as educators, how we should, where we should stand as educators at all levels of education. As Daniela said, it doesn't make any sense to continue educating successful professionals in failed societies. She has given us food for thought. Bojana, from the European experience in Croatia, has invited us to join her in time traveling, and she shared with us research studies on service learning, showing the transformation in the habitus of students and the increased sense of social responsibility. As Bojana said, quoting Paulo Freire, she said, educators have the duty of not being neutral. Bojana invited us to move out of the traditional spaces to reconvert ourselves as educators. Ms. Lopez from Mexico has talked to us about a relevant university, curricular concept relating to social problems. She puts forward a university or institution that is at the service of the community. And she talks about producing change makers, innovative students for innovative universities. And Alejandro Gemelli, with his sincere thoughts, shares his experience with service learning, similar to that of many educators here in the room. Service learning as a pedagogy, as a path to have a different school. And he also poses some questions to us. So, in closing, service learning as a social and educational innovation, as Bojana said, commitment to reality as a source of innovation, Daniela. Letty talked about innovation to produce change makers, and Ale has contributed his valuable experience as a principal. So here we have different ways of thinking about the relationship of service learning with all the factors in the community, but all of them are innovative proposals. All of them break out with a symmetry. with a uniformity, to establish a dialogue in education between the curriculum and the social problems. Undoubtedly, this gives new meaning to learning in real context, founded on experiential, situated, contextualized learning processes. So Boyana, Daniela, Ale, and Leticia have clearly stated that service learning helps students develop complex skills to serve in real community settings, bringing together their knowledge using the procedures learned through the different disciplines, as Nieves said earlier, putting solidarity values and knowledge and content, because we are not just talking here about the conceptual idea of knowledge. We are talking about all the dimensions, the attitudinal, the value dimension. And let me close with the reflection shared by Alejandro. Education can bring about the economic, social, and political changes that are necessary to live in a fairer society. As the utopian horizon is moved further away from us, well, I'm sure that service learning can really bring about those changes. I would like to thank the four of you. This has been a fantastic session. I want to congratulate you all and express my appreciation for being here with you. We leave this session full of learnings and questions. We don't have time for a Q&A here, but I'm sure that you will be around in case anyone wants to ask you any questions. Thank you.
Les cuento que tengo mi público de Mar del Plata que está por acá.
Let me say that I have my fans here from Mar del Plata, so you have your own support group. Okay, great. Once again, thank you, Boyana, Daniela, Leticia, Alejandro, Sebastián, for this session. Now we have reached a key point in time during the day. We need to renovate our energy, so that we will ask you just to bear with us for a couple of minutes, because we have some announcements to make. And we will give you some instructions. And after these announcements, we would like to invite you to stay to take an institutional photo so that we can post it in our social media. And of course, you can repost that. All right, so as you know, we have breakout sessions in the afternoon. On the screen, you will be able to see the different options, the different workshops and panels. You will also find this information on the agenda that you have received in your binders. There, you will be able to see also the names of the speakers in each of the sessions. I would like to remind the panelists of the afternoon sessions that you have to meet your moderators at 2 p.m. in the corresponding rooms. And we ask you all to be there on time so that we can start at 2:15. Now we are going to break for lunch. You can have lunch outside the university. There are plenty of options around the university. Now, let me also say that we have opened the registration for our virtual courses. CLAYSS offers a diploma on service learning. This is specialized training in the pedagogy of service learning. In addition to a specialization course to train promoters of service learning in higher education, and a course on educating to transform. So now, Let me invite the CLAYSS team to stand up, all of you to stand up. I want that, if possible, all the CLAYSS members should be here at the front. We are going to take the picture. Romina is going to take care of this. You please remain in the room, don't leave. Just stand up for the picture, okay? After the photo, we would like to ask the Universidad members to stay here in the room. Perhaps you should move more to the center because otherwise I cannot take the picture.